Asher Whitlock was once the embodiment of urban success. Razor-sharp in Brioni suits, his voice velvet with confidence as he closed multi-million-dollar deals with a flick of a pen. But all empires crumble. His did in a blinding moment of betrayal by his own body. Mid-sentence during a pitch, his vision blurred, his mouth twisted, and he collapsed in front of a room full of sharks who smelled blood. The diagnosis came wrapped in sterile pity, a stroke. Not fatal, but disfiguring. A cerebral betrayal that left his left side sluggish. His once charming smile, now asymmetrical, haunted. Asher clawed back through months of grueling rehabilitation, but he emerged a man cracked open, his former life slipping between the fractures. Back home, his sanctuary had soured. Kyra, statuesque and immaculately manicured, regarded him like a fallen relic. The bedroom, once a place of shared fire, had gone cold. No touches, no tenderness. Even his attempts at intimacy were met with recoiling silence. "Don't," she had whispered once when he tried to kiss her. He never asked again. Their home, all glass and chrome, echoed with absence. And in its silence, Asher realized something devastating. He was no longer a husband, just a burden wrapped in linen. A ghost in his own bed. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of bland, forgettable day that now sears itself into memory. Asher came home early, flowers in one hand, takeout in the other. A flicker of hope curling in his chest like smoke. He'd spent the morning rehearsing something small, something brave, a kiss. Maybe tonight, he'd touch her again. Maybe she'd let him. The house was dim, untouched by warmth, a modern mausoleum of marble floors and cold light. Kyra stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, sleek and composed in her designer blouse. A glass of red wine untouched beside her. She looked up, startled, not guilty, just mildly inconvenienced. Asher noticed the phone screen before she could lock it. A name lit up, Sebastian Vale. Her boss, the one with the predatory smile and the tailored suits. The dam broke quietly. No yelling, no drama, just Asher asking, "How long?" and Kyra exhaling as if unburdened. "Long enough," she said. Long enough to forget the man who once gave her sunflowers for no reason. Long enough to forget vows whispered over champagne. Her voice was clinical, almost bored, as she told him to leave by the weekend. Later that night, he overheard Eloise, his daughter, murmuring to her mother, "It's better this way. He's embarrassing." That was the blade, twisted slow. Not the cheating, not the lies, but the realization that even his little girl now looked at him not with love, but with shame. And just like that, he stopped belonging. The neon buzzed overhead like it was too tired to keep glowing, a dying hum in a town that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Asher's car coughed into the parking lot of Deb's diner, its wheels crunching over gravel like bones. He hadn't planned to stop, hadn't planned much of anything lately, but hunger gnawed at his stomach like a bad memory, and the flickering open sign felt like a dare. Inside, the place smelled of overcooked grease and desperation. Cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that hadn't sung in years. The burger arrived looking like a crime scene, gray, soggy, half-hearted. Asher stared at it, then took one cautious bite. It was cold in the middle, grease pooled like regret. He gagged, pushed the plate away, and stood up with the kind of slow anger that comes from days of silence and humiliation. He carried the plate to the counter, holding it like it offended him personally. "This," he said, "is a culinary insult." The waitress, a sharp-eyed woman with a cigarette tucked behind her ear, raised a brow. "If you can do better," she challenged, "prove it." And he did. In the grimy little kitchen behind the counter, Asher moved with muscle memory and vengeance. He seared, seasoned, toasted, and built a burger that sizzled like a middle finger to everything he'd lost. When he slid the plate across the counter, the silence after the first bite said everything. It wasn't just food. It was a resurrection, one burger at a time. The next few weeks unfolded like steam rising from a skillet, slow, hot, and unexpected. Deborah Langley was more than a diner owner. She was grit wrapped in curves and sarcasm, with eyes that missed nothing and a voice like gravel rolled in honey. She didn't trust easily, especially not men who walked in smelling like broken dreams and acted like they owned her kitchen. But Asher didn't just cook. He transformed her kitchen into something alive again. The way he worked the grill, precise and focused, made her watch from the doorway more than she meant to. Their flirtation was subtle at first. A smirk exchanged over sizzling bacon. A shoulder bump in the tight walk-in cooler. He called her boss lady, with just enough heat to make her pulse jump, and she responded with eye rolls that never quite hit her smile. Then came the night they argued over the new menu, him pushing for innovation, her clinging to what was familiar. It wasn't the yelling that got her, it was the way he leaned in, close enough to feel the tension crackling like static. "You're afraid," he said quietly. "And you're cocky," she shot back. But neither of them moved. The air between them tightened, then snapped. The kiss was fierce, all teeth and breath, and weeks of unsaid things. Her hands curled into his shirt. His gripped her waist like she might vanish. But she pulled back, eyes wide, lips parted. She whispered, "Don't start something you can't finish." His answer came low, rough. "Then let me finish it." That night, it didn't just cross a line, they erased it. Deborah's apartment above the diner was dim, lived in, and smelled faintly of cinnamon and old leather. Asher followed her upstairs in silence, their fingers brushing now and then, each touch sparking something raw and electric. The second the door closed, the tension snapped. Clothes came off in slow, breathless fragments. Buttons popped, zippers whispered open, and skin met skin like they were rediscovering what it meant to be alive. Deborah didn't flinch at his scars. She traced the line along his jaw where the stroke had softened his smile. Kissed the spot like it was holy. "You're still a man," she whispered into his neck. "And I'm still a woman." Her voice cracked slightly, like maybe she hadn't felt like one in a long time. Their bodies fit together like they'd been waiting, hungry, imperfect, aching. It wasn't gentle. It was urgent, messy, real. He held her like she was a lifeline. She clung to him like he might disappear. Breath hitched, fingers clenched. Names were moaned like prayers. And when it was over, tangled in sheets that smelled of lust and second chances, they lay there in the quiet, chest to chest, heart to heart. Asher stared at the ceiling, lips curved in a half-smile. "I don't remember the last time I felt anything," he murmured. Deborah turned toward him, her fingers tracing his ribs like sheet music. "Then maybe," she said softly, "it's time to start remembering." The diner bloomed like a flower in spring, slow at first. Then suddenly, all at once, word spread fast in towns like this, and soon Deb's was no longer a forgotten roadside pit stop. It was the place. Locals came back for Asher's signature whiskey glazed burgers and stayed for Deborah's dry wit and Braden's grumpy charm. The place felt alive, buzzing with warmth, clinking glasses, and the scent of sizzling hope. Asher had found a rhythm again, something more than survival, something that tasted like purpose. Late one night, after the last plate was washed and the lights were dimmed, Deborah poured them each a whiskey and sat beside Asher in the booth they'd unofficially claimed as theirs. The silence was easy now, a comfortable hum instead of dead air. She stared into her glass. "I never told you about Luke," she said, voice soft but steady. "He was my mistake. Took over the kitchen when my mom passed. Took over everything. Control, money." Her fingers tightened around the glass. "By the time I kicked him out, this place was on life support." Asher didn't speak. He just reached across the table, took her hand in his, and squeezed, solid, wordless reassurance. Braden walked by, towel slung over one shoulder. "Just so you two know," he muttered, "if I have to hear this slow-burn romance much longer, I'm spiking the coffee with tequila." Deborah smirked. Asher laughed for the first time in what felt like years. And in that booth, under the flicker of tired lights, something real took root. It was a rainy Thursday when the past came knocking, literally. Asher had just finished restocking the walk-in, the scent of ground beef still clinging to his shirt, when Braden called out from the counter. "Ash," he said, voice unusually tense. "You've got a visitor." He wiped his hands on his apron and walked out front, and there she was, Eloise, his daughter, older now, thinner, but with the same guarded eyes he once knew. She sat in a booth, arms wrapped around herself like armor, soaked from the rain, but too proud to ask for a towel. "Eloise," he said flatly, not quite believing she was real. "Dad," she whispered, and it cut through him like smoke slipping under a door. He slid into the booth across from her, hard-armored but uneasy. "What do you want?" She hesitated, lower lip trembling. "It's Mom. She's in the hospital." "Sebastian." He heard her. Bad. Threw her down the stairs. She might never walk again. Asher leaned back, jaw tightening. The irony burned. Sebastian, the man she left him for. Kyra, The woman who discarded him like a broken appliance. "And you come to me now?" he said, voice low. "Not because you miss me. Not because I'm your father. But because you want me to carry someone else's mess." Eloise's eyes filled. "I didn't know who else to call." He stared at her for a long moment, then quietly said, "You should have thought of that before you let them bury me alive." Asher didn't go after her. He sat alone in that booth for a long while, the coffee in front of him growing cold, untouched. The rain tapped against the diner windows like a memory, trying to get back in. Deborah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her brows slightly furrowed. "Was that?" He nodded once. "Eloise." She slid into the booth across from him, eyes scanning his face. "You okay?" He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "She wants me to come back. Take care of Kyra. Help fix everything." Deborah leaned forward, her voice low and careful. "And do you want to?" He met her eyes, and in that moment the answer was clear. "No, I don't owe them anything. Not anymore." That night, when the last plate was washed and the last customer long gone, Deborah found him standing behind the counter, staring out the window into the darkness. She touched his back, a soft, grounding pressure, and he turned. They didn't speak. She led him upstairs, undressed him slowly, kissed each scar like a vow, and pulled him to bed. The lovemaking was different this time, slower, deeper, as if they were memorizing each other in case the world tried to take this away too. After, curled together beneath the covers, he whispered, "I chose you. Not out of grief, not out of anger, out of love." Deborah smiled into his chest. "Then don't ever unchoose me." And he never did. It started with fatigue. Deborah brushed it off at first, long shifts, late nights, the usual stress of keeping a diner afloat. But then came the bruises she couldn't explain, the dizzy spells, the tremble in her hands as she tried to plate a slice of pie. Asher noticed before she said anything. He watched the color drain from her cheeks, how she leaned on the counter when she thought no one was looking, when she finally collapsed in the kitchen. He didn't panic. He carried her to the truck with trembling arms and drove like the world was on fire. The diagnosis came like a blade wrapped in white paper. Acute leukemia, stage 4. The doctor's mouth moved, soft and rehearsed, but all Asher could hear was the roar of everything shattering. She fought. God, she fought. Through chemo, through blood transfusions, through nights where she could barely lift her head, but still cracked jokes to keep him smiling. Braden took over the kitchen. The town rallied around her, but the light behind her eyes began to dim. One night, in the quiet hospital room, she pulled Asher close, her breath shallow, her skin paper thin. "Do you remember that night we first kissed?" she asked, a weak smile playing at her lips. He nodded, voice caught his throat. "Kiss me like that again," she whispered. "One last time." He did, gently, reverently, like sealing a promise. And then, beneath his touch, with his name on her lips, Deborah slipped quietly away. The church was packed, the way it only ever filled on Christmas or during tragedies that left entire towns breathless. Faces Asher barely knew sat beside ones he'd fed 100 times. The air was thick with lilies and silence, the kind that wrapped around the bones. Damon sat on his lap in a tiny black suit, clinging to Asher's shirt like it was the only thing tethering him to earth. When the pastor called his name, Asher stood, his legs heavy, his heart heavier. At the pulpit, words felt impossible, but somehow they came. He spoke of second chances, of a woman who didn't just save his life, but remade it. Of nights spent talking over burnt coffee and mornings that smelled like butter and new beginnings. He spoke of her laugh, her fire, her love so big it made the world feel smaller and safer. When his voice finally cracked, Braden was there, wrapping an arm around him, steady and sure. After the service, they laid Deborah to rest beneath the big oak tree on the hill. And as the last rose hit the casket, Asher whispered, "You are my home. I'll keep you alive in everything I do." Asher's story is a reminder that life can break you, but it can also rebuild you in unexpected, beautiful ways if you let it. In today's world of constant comparison and pressure to appear perfect, his journey teaches us the power of resilience, the value of honest work, and the importance of choosing love that sees your scars and stays anyway. Don't measure your worth by status or salary. Measure it by how you show up for yourself, for others, even when it hurts. Healing doesn't come all at once, but it comes. And sometimes it starts with flipping a burger,